Tuesday Talks. Very excited to be here with you today. 안녕하세요. Tuesday Talks에 오신 것을 환영합니다. 오늘 우리와 함께 해주셔서 감사합니다. I'm excited today to be here with Matthew, Beth, and Kathy from the Eastman School of Music of the University of Rochester, the Juilliard School, and the Oberlin Conservatory of Music. I, for sure, do not know anything about performing arts programs, so I'm excited to learn a lot this hour, and I know you are too. So come and join us. Listen to these wonderful colleagues talk about their programs and also about performing arts in general. And please do use the chat boxes to ask your questions, whether you're on YouTube or whether you're on Zoom. You can make use of all the chat box functions, and we will make sure our panelists here get to those questions. And so we will leave some time at the very end and we'll try to get to as many of your questions. All right, so I think that's it from me, and I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves.
Well, good morning, everybody, or it's morning here anyway. And it's great to be here. My name is Matthew Artison. I'm the Associate Dean of Admissions at the Eastman School of Music at the University of Rochester.
And hello, I'm Kathleen Tisar, Associate Dean for Enrollment Management at the Juilliard School.
And hi, I'm Beth Weiss, and I'm here from Oberlin to talk about the Conservatory and the College of Arts and Sciences.
So to get us started, just thought we'd show you where each of our schools is located. We're all in sort of the eastern part of the United States. And one of the reasons we're doing this together is we also represent three different kinds of music schools. So we have Oberlin, which is part of a college and a combined college and conservatory. Eastman, as I said, is part of the University of Rochester. And then Juilliard, of course, is a standalone conservatory. So we're going to talk a bit today about the differences between those different kinds of institutions and the similarities. And the different degrees that are offered, the application process, and all of that. So first, to give you a little bit of an overview of each school, I'll start us off with Eastman. Eastman is located in Rochester, New York, which is in western New York State. It's about 350 miles from New York City. It's also pretty close to Toronto in Canada. And Eastman is a school that, if you want to go ahead and advance to the next slide, Eastman is a school that offers degrees in performance, in composition, in jazz performance and composition, in contemporary media, in musicology, theory, very comprehensive music school. And what you see here are some of our performance spaces, the large Kodak Hall up on the left, Kilburn Hall, our recital hall on the right there, and just below that Hatch Recital Hall. And we have about 520 undergraduate students. Actually, I think this is, if you want to advance to the next slide, this is information there. And about 320 graduate students. As I mentioned, we're part of the University of Rochester, so there is the opportunity to study at both Eastman and the college with a dual degree, or just to take classes at the college. About 25% of our students are international students, and they do come mostly from Asia. And all of our students are merit scholarship eligible, which means any student, whether you're from the United States or an international student and you're admitted to this school, likely to receive a merit scholarship. And then I think I already mentioned the various degrees that we offered that you can see there. And that's a little bit about Eastman. Turn it over now to Kathy.
So I'm working at the Juilliard School, which is in New York City, and we are located in the middle of Lincoln Center. So in this photo, you see the horizontal band is the Juilliard building. That's our building. We don't have a campus. And to the left is the home of the New York Philharmonic. And further to the left out of the picture is the rest of Lincoln Center. So we are one of the constituent groups at Lincoln Center. If you go to the next slide, please. Here are some facts about Juilliard. We have about 850 students, and about a third of our student body is international. And of the international students, the two largest sending countries are China and Korea. Juilliard is rather unique in that besides our music division, we also have a dance division and a drama division. So that combination of artists lends a unique flavor to the school. We do have the possibility of cross-registration with Columbia University and Barnard College, but it's cross-registration rather than double degrees or double majors. And if you're curious about that, we give several presentations on that program over the next few months. And similar to Eastman, applicants can request consideration for merit and need-based scholarships. It's a very simple process. I do want to mention on the next slide, we have a photo of our new campus in Tianjin, China. Our campus there has a pre-college division for students through high school age, and then a graduate studies division where we're offering a Master of Music degree with several majors, and that opened this fall. So the students are just there. And that new building you see in the center of this photo is a rendering of the building, which will open next month. So that's a little bit about what Juilliard has to offer, and I'll turn it over to Beth.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Yeah, here's a pretty picture of Oberlin, sort of our main entrance with our koi pond. And the next slide, I think, has a few pictures of some of the halls. And a different flavor than a city setting. Oberlin is located 35 miles southwest of Cleveland, Ohio. So Cleveland is the city and the airport that we use, but we're actually a really small rural liberal arts college town. And so we're on the same campus with Oberlin College, where you can get a Bachelor of Arts degree. And we're also a standalone conservatory that confers the Bachelor of Music degree. You can also get a double degree. You can come and study viola performance as well as chemistry, if that sounds interesting to you. That's generally a 5-year program. And the facts and figures here, about 580 students, and they're all undergraduate, which is another distinction with Oberlin. In addition to being rural and out of the big city, it is focused on undergraduates only. We have 17% international, and we offer all of the same degrees that Eastman and Juilliard offer on the undergrad level. So everything, all the performance areas and composition and electronic and computer music as well. And merit scholarships are available for those of you who need help with paying for it. So yeah, that's kind of Oberlin Conservatory quickly. So. Is this Matthew who's doing the types of
Yep.
schools?
Sorry, I just started talking with I was still muted, so
No
try
worries.
that again. So as I was saying earlier, we represent these 3 different types of schools. There are many different types of schools, and you know, we've organized them into these sort of 3 different categories. It's important to keep in mind that you know, the really critical thing is that if you're looking for a professional degree in music, many different kinds of schools offer that degree. And so the first kind of school I'm going to outline for you is the university. So this is a university that would have several different schools that might include a music school. So Eastman falls into this category, but there's also, you know, a School of Business and a School of Education, the College of Arts and Sciences, of course. Sometimes there's a law school, these sorts of professional schools. So generally this means that, you know, the university setting is usually overall much larger in size. You have these students doing all of these different programs, very wide range of offerings, usually that as a music student you can take advantage of to some degree. And then maybe a wider range of degrees that are offered in music, including the professional degree, the Bachelor of Music degree. In a university setting, you might find a slightly wider range of major options. All of these music schools are going to offer performance, for example, but as you look at the different types, you might find some additional opportunities like sound engineering or recording arts, music education, music industry, those kinds of things. A music school in a university setting will often offer the opportunity to study another major. So as Beth was mentioning, if you're interested in math or languages or sciences, in addition to music, you might have the opportunity to do both. And then, of course, a university can offer you the opportunity to have that sort of more typical college experience, maybe go to some football games once people are allowed to go to football games again, and that sort of thing. But one key thing here that runs through all of the different types of schools is that the faculty are a significant, critical part of your consideration, who you will study with. And you'll find that all of the different kinds of schools have excellent faculty. So the next slide is the next type, which is the college, different from a university in that the college is generally smaller in size. I think we tend to associate universities with research and maybe doctoral degrees in various subjects. And colleges tend to focus on the undergraduate and maybe the master's level as well in some cases. But they're generally smaller in size than a university, still with a very wide range of offerings. Various degrees can be earned in music and otherwise. And again, you're going to see that variety of majors that are offered based on the different departments that might be part of that college. Similarly, again, you'll have the opportunity to study in an area outside of music, whether through a double major or a dual degree. And that traditional college experience, which can usually be maybe a smaller campus experience than the large university, a little bit more close-knit. At Oberlin, for example, you just walk across the quad to go from the music building to one of the other academic buildings. And again, faculty are key. So you'll find that college-based music schools also have excellent faculty, and that's one of the most important factors in your consideration. And then finally, on the next slide is the model that our international students are often most familiar with, and that's the conservatory model, the standalone school that is much more strictly focused on music and maybe some of the other arts. As Kathy was saying, at Juilliard, they also have programs in drama and dance. So these tend to be smaller in size, more just focused on the professional training. They're just going to offer those professional degrees, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what those different degrees are. But the Bachelor of Music or the BFA, Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, are really going to be what they offer. They may have double majors or cross registration available, often with an outside institution that might have some sort of a partnership. And the whole experience is kind of centered around performance and music related activities. And again, faculty are still a key part of the consideration. So one thing, just to sum up these school types that I would emphasize, is that while they're all different environments, they all offer the professional degree, they all have excellent faculty, and it's really more a matter of what is the environment that you want to be in. That you might consider. So with that, we're going to move on to talk about the different degree types.
Yeah, Matthew, as you were saying that, it reminded me that at all of our schools, not only the three of us, but all of our other peer institutions, we do, because of accreditation, we're offering very similar curriculum in all of these Bachelor of Music programs. And so it is about what you feel, if you want the big city, or if you want something, sleepier or less of a maybe crazy, but sometimes it's so great to roll out of bed and be in Lincoln Center, you know? So it's about personality and what you feel will be most comfortable, you'll be most comfortable with. So in terms of the undergrad degrees, you see these letters all the time when you talk about bachelor's degrees, and the third one on this list, Bachelor of Music, is the one I was just discussing, where it's about 80% of your curriculum is music based, and that's not only performance, so large ensembles and chamber music, but also music theory, music history, and keyboard skills, and oral skill. I mean, all music all day long. And for you or for your friends who are doing that at a high level, it's the best, because they just get to play and sing and practice all the time. And then they have a few classes that they take that are sort of necessary, and some embrace them more than others, but many times it's such a dream to be able to practice and make music all the time with high level like-minded musicians. So that's the Bachelor of Music. That's the third one. The first one, Bachelor of Arts, you can get a Bachelor of Arts in music, and many schools, universities offer a BA in music. And I describe that as a half music, half liberal arts kind of mix. And so oftentimes a BA, not always, but oftentimes a BA is for students who love music, but who maybe don't want to make their living in music. So it's less of a pre-professional training and more of sort of a general, I still love music, I still want it in my life, but I also want to study English, or I also want to study philosophy, or I also want to study chemistry. The BFA, the second choice here, Bachelor of Fine Arts, is akin to the Bachelor of Music, but it's really conferred for students who are studying other arts, theater, visual art, creative writing sometimes. And so it's really the parallel of a Bachelor of Music, only in other fine art areas. And then the Bachelor of Science, the last option, is the one I'm least familiar with. Oberlin does not offer a BS, but it is more science-based and less liberal arts based. It's going to be more specific, maybe in computer science or some of the other hard science areas. So those are some of the differences. You would not, for example, get a Bachelor of Science in violin performance. You would get a Bachelor of Music in violin performance, or a Bachelor of Arts in music, where your violin is kind of the core of some of your curricular work. So it's a little bit nuanced, but it just, hopefully that gives you a little bit of background about the different kinds of degrees. So is there another slide with that? No, is that, yeah, so I kind of, is this mine too? I guess I kind of touched on this, that the Bachelor of Music is all, is so much, 65–80% music during the day, and is a pre-professional degree. That's the one that we work with most often at our institutions.
Okay, I have to put some power on my computer. There we go. All right. So when you finish your bachelor's degree, the next level up is a master's degree. And we talk about them the same way Beth described the bachelor's degrees, where you have some that are more oriented towards the research, the writing part of studies. And then you have other degrees that are oriented towards the actual doing of your art. So parallel to the Bachelor of Music degree is the Master of Music degree. So if you're studying performance, that would be your next step. The Master of Fine Arts degree, similar to the Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, is generally in dance and theater or other art forms. And the Master of Arts degree is more of a research degree, similar to the Bachelor of Arts degree. If you have the credential of a master's degree, then you can consider moving on to a doctoral degree. The Doctor of Philosophy, or PhD, is oriented toward research. The Doctor of Musical Arts is the one for performing musicians. So that's the one where you're more hands-on as opposed to research. If we move to the next slide, we'll see that there are programs that are not degrees. And you'll find, especially in music, that certificate and diploma programs are pretty common, but they don't qualify you for the next step. So if you do a Bachelor of Music degree and then you do an artist diploma, you cannot then do a doctorate without doing a master's in between. So you have to proceed from bachelor's to master's to doctoral degree. But there are these other programs, they go by a lot of different names. Artist diploma is very common, performance diploma, professional studies certificate. These are all programs that are very, very heavy on their playing side, and the academic study is pretty much non-existent. So you're not having to go to a lot of classes, rather you're doing a lot of creative work. And that said, we're going to give you a brief overview of the degrees that are offered at each of our schools. So Matthew?
Thank you, Kathy. So at Eastman, we do offer the full range of degrees from undergraduate through the doctoral level. They're all listed here. You know, basically it's the Bachelor of Music, the Master of Music, and the Doctor of Musical Arts, or the BM, the MM, and the DMA that are offered in performance, but also in other areas such as composition and jazz performance. And then the MA and the PhD are those more kind of research degrees. So those are offered in theory, in musicology, a degree in music leadership, and I should have mentioned under the Master of Music degree, the Contemporary Media and Film Composition degree, which is a relatively new one for us. So a fairly comprehensive offering of degrees.
And at Juilliard, we are all performance majors. So we have the BFA for dance and for acting, the MFA for acting, and then on the music side, we have the Bachelor of Music, the Master of Music, what we call a graduate diploma, which is similar to the Master of Music, but is not a degree program. And then on the highest level, we have the Artist Diploma and the Doctor of Musical Arts. So all of those are offered at Juilliard in all the usual instrumental and vocal majors plus composition. Beth?
Yeah, no, Oberlin, again, we have all undergraduate only. So the Bachelor of Music, which is a performance focused area in an orchestral instrument or jazz composition. We also offer a BA on the college side, which is interesting. There's no audition required. You don't choose your major up front. It's something where you just apply to the college and you come because you want to study something that's in the liberal arts area. And then we also have the wonderful double degree program where you can do both. And the BA is of interest to a lot of students because they have, like I mentioned earlier, a love of music. They've studied music. They want to be around music. And in normal times, there's concerts to go to and there's areas to practice. And there's other similar level musicians who would like to play chamber music with you, but who are doing it, you know, just and only for fun and avocation rather than as a pursuit in a pre-professional track. So the place someone once said kind of oozes music, whether you're on the college side or the conservatory side. I don't know how that translates in Korean, but so good luck whoever's doing that. So there's a lot of music all over. And so you can choose at what level you'd like to pursue that as you go forward with your undergraduate education. So that's basically what we have at Oberlin. And who's this? Is this me, majors? Who's this?
Beth, go for it.
Is it me again? Okay, sorry. Yeah, again, we've sort of been dancing around this performance. We offer it instrumental, which is oftentimes you think of orchestral instruments, but in this area, we also have vocal performance, which can be more classical, sort of opera based, but we also have some of us jazz voice, and sometimes there's a musical theater option, which some schools offer and some schools don't. So if you are a singer, that's something to look more closely at. Is it, am I preparing to sing opera on the main stage, or am I doing musical theater, which is a very different type of training? And then jazz performance, which is another, you know, so all the study of that idiom. And then we all have, not only our schools, but other schools have composition. So it's classical. So you're writing large ensemble works for, say, orchestras, or small chamber music works, or for some of the new classic contemporary configurations are less traditional, where you have sort of whatever instrumentation the composer thought would be interesting. So that's a genre that's constantly changing, an ensemble formation. And then in some cases you have film scoring. So you're writing music for movies or sometimes video game backgrounds, those sorts of things. And then electronic and computer music, again, a little bit of maybe the video composition, but it's manipulating sounds through digital media. Sometimes it has a video component as well, and or it can be just audio. So those are the different breakdowns. And all of, these can be studied in that very intense 80% of your day kind of way, if you will.
Great. So now we're going to talk a bit about how the application process works. And one thing to keep in mind as we go here is on that previous slide, there are all of these different majors that you can be applying for. And what you're required to do is through the application process does depend to some degree on which application or which major you're applying for and which degree, of course. But in general terms, one thing we always like to point out is that the components of the music application process are very similar to the sort of regular college application process, if you will, but add on to that. So we always like to say that our music applicants have the privilege of getting to do everything that a regular college applicant has to do, and then having to do some more. And basically what it does, as you can see here, is it takes all of the usual application components, an application form, school transcripts, essays that you write, test scores that you submit, recommendations from people who know you, and then it tacks on this audition component, which is a major component that we'll dig into a little bit more in a minute. But just to go through these real quickly, the application form is the online application for the school that you're applying to. And it's really important for each school that you apply to that you're researching what their requirements are, what the form is that you need to use. In the United States, there are some combined application forms, like the Common App is very popular, but a lot of our professional music schools are not part of that. So you have to go to the school's individual website to use their own application form. So it always takes a little bit of searching to figure out what form am I supposed to use for this school, but it can always be found on the school's website. Really, any school is going to ask you to produce a transcript from your previous levels of study. So if you're applying for the Bachelor of Music degree, we will want to see your high school transcript. Likewise, if you're applying for a master's degree, then we would want to see the undergraduate transcript. The essay is, an important piece of the application. I think in the regular college application, there's a lot of energy around the essay. It's considered maybe one of the most important components of the application because it is the one way in which you sort of separate yourself from everybody else who's getting good grades and has good test scores, and it sort of shows how you're different. In the music application, of course, the audition is a big piece of what separates you from everybody else, but we're still very interested in the essay because it is an opportunity for you to express yourself in writing to us, especially as an international applicant. That's an opportunity to demonstrate your use of the English language, and we'll talk more specifically about that in a minute as well. But it's also an opportunity for you to tell us something about yourself that we wouldn't otherwise know from reading the rest of your application. In other words, it's not about your accomplishments and your achievements and awards that you've won and who you studied with. That's all stuff that can go elsewhere in your application, probably in the form of a resume. But it's a chance for you to tell us something about yourself that we wouldn't otherwise know. Test scores may or may not be required by the school that you're applying to. I think music schools for a long time have been, many of them have not required these, but if they're part of a college or university, often they have. But there is a trend now in the United States moving towards more what we call test optional policies, not strictly requiring those scores. So that's just one of those things you'll have to, again, research each school. This is going to be a common theme, and see what their requirements are as far as test scores. But these in the United States consist of things like the SAT, Scholastic Aptitude Test, or the ACT, those kinds of scores. And then of course, for international students, we do require either TOEFL or IELTS or Duolingo. We'll talk about that on another slide as well. And then recommendations. So for a regular college application, it may seem straightforward that you need academic teachers to write you recommendations. For the performing arts side, often you will be asked to submit artistic recommendations. So these are maybe your private teacher, maybe an ensemble director. And then again, depending on the school, some of us may, may still want to see at least one academic recommendation. So that can still be part of it. One more thing to keep track of and make sure you know what the requirements are for each school that you're applying to. But this is an opportunity for us to hear about you from somebody else. So it's just a chance for a teacher who knows your work to tell us about you. And then, of course, the audition. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. But let's dig a little bit more into the English language proficiency, which we mentioned under test scores. So just to reiterate, know what the requirement is for each school, what test scores are accepted, and what the school's minimums are. We really encourage you to, take the test when you need to take the test. In other words, don't wait until after the deadline. And don't worry about reporting a score that might be below the minimum requirement. It's important for the schools to know where you stand with regard to the English language. We do know that you're learning a new language, that this is not your native language, and we know that it takes some time to build those skills. So it is helpful for us to see where you are with regard to the minimum. And there may be an opportunity to take that test again, and then showing us both scores gives us the opportunity to see the improvement that you've made, and that's not a bad thing. That can be very helpful for us. Another common mistake we see is that students will assume that if they play well enough, that the English proficiency doesn't matter so much. But our schools are pretty strict about the English proficiency requirements, because it's one thing to be able to function in your lesson, just verbally speaking with your teacher. But as we outlined earlier, the degree requires a lot more than just the lesson. You have to go into a music history class, do some reading assignments, do some writing assignments. You have liberal arts requirements at the undergraduate level. So there is an academic component to the degree that really requires that you have a firm grasp of English coming into it. And then on this next slide, we're just showing you, there's a lot of information here. So I'll just vamp while you get your screenshots in. But this is just each of our schools' current English requirements. And so I won't read through all of this. You can see it there, but it just gives what the minimum score requirements are and for which tests. One thing this year to keep in mind with the pandemic and everything is that some schools are being more flexible in terms of which scores they will accept. We all still have this requirement. It's still a critical part of your application. But you should be in touch with the schools that you're applying to if you're having trouble accessing a test date, or if you're wondering if a different type of score will be acceptable, or a different type of test rather. And so we're aware of the difficulties around these testing centers, but the testing agencies are also taking a lot of steps to make sure that students can still access these exams. So these are all of our requirements. You'll find them on our websites as well, and you'll find the requirements for any school that you're applying to on their website. So with that, we're going to move on and talk more about the audition itself.
Yeah, as Matthew mentioned that, this is the biggest part of, well, it's a big added part of your process, but it's also kind of the most important. We always say, what's the most audition, right? So getting prepared for that, looking at the audition repertoire, deciding which schools, which teachers, your private teachers can help you with this. Sometimes those of you who have advanced study, your parents may not be, they think you play really well because they're your parents and they're supposed to say that. So, and they may not be professional musicians, so they think it sounds nice anyway. But your private teachers can really help guide you as to which competitive level school in the States or internationally or at home. So once you kind of decide, then you're going to need to prepare an audition for entry. In many cases, in most cases now, it's very common to have a what we call a pre-screening, which is sort of a first round where you'll submit something, and if they like what they're hearing, then they will invite you to come for a live audition on campus. Now, all of this is on hold because of COVID. So right now, most auditions are happening either by a recorded audition that you submit a video for, or it's a live, maybe Zoom audition format where you tune in and the faculty tune in and you play through your pieces like that. So it's really a very big component of the entrance. The additional, we also like to say that if you pass the audition, then we look at the other things. We know that you've got the musical ability, so then we look further and is your English sufficient? Have you graduated from high school? Have you done good work when you've been in high school? What are your music teachers saying about you in terms of not only your talent, but your work ethic and how you learn and how you progress? So, but the audition really kicks it off. And so each school has different requirements, although sometimes you're lucky enough to find an audition program that you can replicate at 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 schools. Often each school might have one strange piece that is on the list just because some faculty member wants to hear something special. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. But that's basically what we're going to use as our first round of, if we're interested in you, we're going to be using the audition as a judgment. And like I said, the auditions right now will be probably virtual. A lot of our schools tend to come to you internationally to hear auditions, and that's on hold because of travel restrictions and COVID. So you'll have to really look at the details on the application on each website to see what's required. And for those of you who are tuned in who are not necessarily looking to study music, then you can kind of skip all this, right? If you just want to come and go to a school where you get the BA, like Oberlin or University of Rochester or some of the other big universities and whatnot, you want to play your violin for fun, you don't have to do the audition at all. But for those of you who want to come and pursue a pre-professional music program in the form of a Bachelor of Music, then the audition is paramount. That's really the focus of the whole thing. So here's some tips. We talk about practicing that audition program that you put together. Sometimes we suggest that you book a space. Again, this is difficult in the time of COVID, but a church or a school, you can invite family members, neighbors, put a little wiggly 4-year-old in the front row and see if you can still focus and get through all your pieces with those kinds of distractions. It's a way to practice getting in front of an audition situation. And so to help get the nerves out a little bit. Yeah, practice makes perfect. I think auditions, they expect you to be nervous, but you do get better at auditioning. Like anything else, experience is a wonderful teacher. So we often see this, the first audition, everyone's kind of a nervous wreck, but by the time they get through their 6th audition, they're feeling much more comfortable with the process and how it goes. And again, I'm talking about in a regular world where you get to come to campuses and play live for the faculty. That's really doesn't look like that's going to be happening for this particular admission cycle. So that creates different kinds of challenges as how you meet faculty, how you check out and learn about the schools. So we're all sort of in uncharted territory with this, but we're willing to work with you as you go through the process. So audition, 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 and practice, practice, practice. You know, I mean, it's kind of that's what we're about. So there you go.
So along with attending school, there comes a bill and you have to pay for going to school. And it is true that a student who is not a US citizen cannot qualify for US federal funding, but you still might be able to qualify for institutional need-based grants. So that would be, you know, if you have insufficient income, the school might give you some grants for need-based. And there also might be merit-based awards and scholarships. So again, based on the audition generally for music schools. At some schools, you have to fill out separate applications. So there might be, especially at larger universities, there might be a specific scholarship that you have to apply for. It's different at each of our schools, but you also might investigate whether there are some grants or scholarships from your own government or from foundations in your own country, and that will vary. But as Matthew says, you have to do the research. So if you take a quick look at the next slide, you'll see that each of our institutions does offer some sort of funding to international students. Eastman says that the scholarships are merit-based, need-informed. It's pretty much similar at Juilliard. Oberlin also will offer funding to international applicants. You can see a common thread here is that you have to fill out something called the CSS profile. And that documents your family's assets and needs, and that helps us determine the amount of funding we can award you. But do notice that each of us have a different deadline for submitting the profile and any other documentation that's required. So the earliest would be Oberlin. So if you're applying to Oberlin, you'd have to submit these documents by January 15th. For Eastman, it's February 15th. And for Juilliard, it's March 1st. So at least in the case of Juilliard, if you don't submit that information, you will not get any scholarship awards. Sometimes students assume, well, I'm auditioning, so I'll get some money. That's not the case. You really have to go through the requirements for each school. And to find that out, again, you have to research. Matthew?
So now we're going to talk a little bit about what happens once your application has been submitted, you have completed your audition. How do we decide? How do we make these decisions about who gets to attend our schools? So this first slide is just sort of showing the decision process for, again, the regular college process, the non-performing arts process, where they often talk about a holistic review process where they're looking at everything in your application, recommendations, test scores, your essay, your transcripts, and they're all kind of, more or less equally balanced because they're looking at academics, but also the interests and skills that you have, and they're trying to shape their class in a particular way. On the next slide, it shows more of the music specific decision process where, again, and I think Beth did an excellent job of emphasizing this, the audition is really important. So that is one thing that is heavily weighed, and as she said, it's sort of the first thing that's considered. For many of us do the process this way, where it's after the audition, it's after the faculty have recommended that you be admitted based on the audition, that we then look at the rest of the file to see that you're qualified in other ways as well. So it's audition first, and then we're going to look at the recommendations and at any required test scores, your writing sample, and your academic performance through your transcripts. One other thing, that we're considering as we're making these decisions is, how many of each instrument we can accommodate. So it's really important for us to maintain the right number of students playing each instrument, singing with each voice type, so that the curriculum works for the students, so that in the orchestra there aren't, too many flutists that are trying to play the 3 flute parts, or not enough horn players, or whatever it is. We have to balance those numbers very carefully. So just like in the regular college application process, you all know about students who were certainly academically qualified to get into a given normal university, but just didn't get in because the numbers are so big. That can happen in music admissions too. We have to say no to a certain number of qualified applicants each year just based on space restrictions. So that can be part of it too. And yeah, the next thing is the timeline, which I think is...
Yeah, Matthew, that's an excellent point about the enrollment management, how many flutes we can take. Enrollment management is a funny buzzword in higher education, but it means, not only budgets, but also in our case, how many of these and how many of those. And so this is why we encourage people who are applying to, what we say, cast a wide net, have many options. We don't need 20 options, but perhaps more than 4, more than 3, just in case you just don't know what happens. And also with financial aid, you may get a wonderful offer from a different school that you didn't anticipate, and it might make the difference in being able to attend that school or going to school at all. So just keeping that in mind. So that was a great point. And so this is a quick timeline. It's all right here. Again, screenshot it. I think you can get copies of these slides. Maybe they can put that in the chat, or maybe they already have. A lot of these deadlines are very similar to, I'm looking at, the fall semester beginning. Yeah. Okay, so December 1 is the first date that pops out for me. That's when most of the competitive music schools have have deadlines for the application rather. The audition period typically is January, February, and March, but again, a little bit shifted because of coronavirus. Most decisions will be released by April 1st, if not earlier. So you'll not only get your decision if you've been admitted, but also any kind of scholarship that's available to you to help you pay for it. And then the undergrad deadline is May 1. That's when you need to make a decision and tell us what your plans are. And then right before that is April 15th. So those of you who are tuned in, who are looking at graduate degrees, they have a little bit of an earlier decision time. So this is kind of how your last year of high school would map out in terms of what we're asking you to do and when we're asking you to do it.
Okay, so just a couple more points and then we have a few questions that we'll get to. All of our schools are well aware that there are challenges for adjusting to college and to a different college if you're moving from like a bachelor's to a master's. Some of these challenges include academic classes and how they're taught and how you have to study, the competitive level of the other musicians around you and what you're used to. If you're a top musician where you come from and everyone at your new school is a top musician, it's pretty intense. And then just the general culture of the place you land, both the culture of the institution and of the country you're in. So on the next slide, we have a few examples of how our schools support our international students. There's usually an international student office, which certainly helps with your visas. There are writing centers or different kinds of academic support to help you with your studies, your academic studies. There's usually some sort of English as a second language support to strengthen your English language skills. Health and counseling will take care of your mental and physical health. Career Center will help give you some ideas about where to go next after you finish your schooling. And there are even student groups that can help you just from a social standpoint so that you are more comfortable. Although we always encourage students to break out of their comfort zone, to break out of your group. So, when you first come to the new country, you might find it helpful to stick with people who speak your language and who understand where you're coming from. But part of the adventure is meeting people from places that you're not familiar with and learning about their countries. So that's one of the benefits of studying in a different country. So that said, let's get to some questions. And I know our folks at InitialView are going to help us with the translations.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew, Beth, and Kathy. This has been great. Really good comprehensive overview. And as the panelists talked about, researching the specific institutions that you're applying to is key. So I'm going to put this slide up here so that you have the websites and the contact addresses to ask and ask your follow-up. But in the meantime, we do have a little bit of time to get your questions answered. So do use the chat boxes and we'll get to your questions. So the first question that's here that I want to ask our panelists is, how serious of a musician do I have to be to know that I am suited for a Bachelor of Music or a Master of Music versus a BA or an MA that does kind of half and half music? What type of advice would you give in terms of trying to gauge what type of degree you are more suited for?
Go ahead, Matthew.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I think one of the ways I like to characterize this is, we outlined earlier kind of the balance of time spent in the professional degree on music. It's like, 80% music, 20% other things. So I think it's really just looking at, how much time am I currently spending on music? And one way I like to describe it is, are you the student who's so busy practicing and so into practicing that your parents have to call you like 3 times for dinner before you come downstairs? You just don't want to stop. You don't have to be reminded to practice. It's just something that you can't help but doing. If you're that kind of music student, then the professional degree is something you should look into. If you're a student who just sort of enjoys music, wants to keep it part of your life, but you have other interests that you want to pursue, maybe that a dual degree would be something you want to look at, but you should also keep in mind that you can keep music as part of your path, regardless of what you study. At least, many of the schools in the United States are set up that way. Again, they have musical opportunities for students who are not majoring in music to play in ensembles, to take classes in music, to take lessons, and still earn credit, college credit for that, but towards something like a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science degree. So it's really just examining yourself and how much time and energy you're voluntarily spending with your music.
And I would just add that, oh, sorry, Beth. I would just add that another way to check is to go to our websites and look at the audition requirements. And if you're not at the level of the audition requirements, then you're not ready at this moment. Now, maybe you want to get ready, but if you look at the audition requirements and it says you have to play a full concerto and you've never done that, then you're not ready, and maybe you should look at a different approach to study at college.
Yeah, and your private teacher, if you have a current private individual teacher, he or she may be able to say, you're not, if you're willing to ask the bold question, they may say, well, you're really talented, but I don't think your heart is in it. Or you're just, you've been sawing away for years and you're not have the talent, or you don't have the drive to do it. So maybe with people who are working with you closely musically, they could also give you some ideas about what path you can pursue. So.
Great. So this is a question that's in connection to what you all answered, but it's a question in regards to the outcomes of the degrees in your particular schools in general, because you have different types of music schools. So in general, if you wouldn't mind speaking to what your students usually typically end up doing after their degrees.
I like to say that, you know, in English, the end of your studies is a ceremony called commencement, and commencement means beginning. So when you leave our schools, you are beginning your career, and you might do many, many things. And then as you advance in your career, your interests narrow, you get more focused. So our students, even when they're in school, might have started freelancing, taking on work, performing, you know, depending on your area. Maybe you're a pianist who starts accompanying others and you earn income that way. So in some ways you build your career step by step as you leave the school. But we train performers and our students go out and perform. That might mean different things to different people, but you know, the typical performance careers would be, you know, a full-time orchestra career, a full-time chamber music career. But there are other people who don't have full-time jobs. They have many either gigs or part-time jobs. Some teach and perform. So that's how they put their lives together.
Yeah, I would just add that, you know, so all of our professional programs produce performing musicians, but we also see a lot of our graduates do teach. Many of our performance majors, when they come in, don't think that they're going to wind up teaching, or think that they don't want to teach, and then they get some exposure to that while they're in school. Certainly as a graduate student, they may have to do some teaching as part of a financial award that they have, and find that it is something that's really interesting to them, which is not that shocking. You know, it's just they've been attracted to this study because of the impact of a teacher in many cases, and then when they realize that they can also do that, I think that's really enticing to them. So we see many of our graduates going on to teach, and at every level, you know, the pre-college level, the college level. And we also have a lot of students who will complete the Bachelor of Music degree and then decide to go in a completely different direction, you know, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. Maybe especially for parents, is that, you know, a bachelor's degree is a bachelor's degree, and a bachelor's degree in music doesn't close the door to other paths of professional study in graduate school, whether it's law school, medical school, what have you. We have students who successfully navigate that transition from the music degree to some other area. So that's important to keep in mind as well.
All right, I think we have time for one last question. And this is a question just asking about the diploma program that was mentioned. When would someone choose to do a diploma program or certificate program versus a full degree?
I think sometimes the decision is made based on my English is not strong enough, so instead of a degree, I'll do a diploma program. But the better way to choose to do a diploma program is because you have that really intense focus on the performance career. And generally, when you go to school, to college, you've already embarked on that career. So our diplomas and certificates tend to be very intense. And so you should not decide to do that because it's going to be easier because you won't have academic classes. You should decide to do a diploma or certificate because it helps you get closer to your goals.
Great. Thank you. All right, so as we wrap up, I would like to give the panelists the floor to just say any final words that they want to say to our audience here in Korea.
I'll jump in and say that my final words are, do your research, check the websites. A lot of times, as Beth has mentioned, things are changing because of the pandemic. And so you want to make sure that you know what's happening in regards to your application and audition requirements. And if you have any questions at all, our emails are on this slide.
Yeah, I think we're here to help. This is a huge endeavor of embarking on your college search, especially if you're planning on doing this internationally. And there's a lot of questions. Of course, all of us have very comprehensive websites, but if you're confused or you need help, we're all here to sort of give you some information so that you can go forward in the best and most thorough way. So please don't hesitate to contact us.
I'll just emphasize that, don't hesitate to communicate. That's why we're here. We do have a lot of information on our websites and encourage you to use that, but these email addresses, you should never hesitate to send an email with a question. That's what we get paid for. We're waiting to hear from prospective students all the time, so never hesitate to contact us.
We need to see the dog, Matthew. Can you get the dog? Come on.
The dog is a puppy, really, and she's in a state right now, so
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought
you
maybe
can probably hear her.
we could get a look at her. So anyway, she sounds like she really wants to be next to you. So
Yeah.
anyway, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this presentation as much as I did. And just special thank you to our panelists, Matthew, Beth, Kathy. Thank you for waking up very early in the morning to be with our students in Korea. All right, hope you have a good evening. 안녕히 계세요. 다음 주에 뵙겠습니다. Bye.